What really separates the elite project managers from everyone else? After 2 decades in the trenches, I can tell you it isn't luck. And it's definitely not about being the smartest person in the room. It all comes down to having a disciplined, strategic framework for dealing with uncertainty, specifically for handling threats. Because in our world, it's not a matter of if things go wrong, but when. And how you respond, well, that defines everything. In the next few minutes, we're going to break down that exact framework. This isn't just theory. This is a masterclass in the practical, real-world strategies that protect your projects, your career, and your organization's bottom line.
Okay, let's jump right in with a question that should keep every project leader up at night. What is the true cost of a guess you were 100% sure was right? I want you to really hold on to that thought. We've all been there, right? That moment of absolute certainty, that gut feeling that says this is the way. But as professional project managers, our job is to move beyond guessing. Our job is to integrate all the moving parts and manage the full spectrum of what could happen. By the end of this explainer, I promise you, you'll have a definitive, powerful answer to this question that will fundamentally change how you approach your work.
All right, first things first, let's get our terms laser focused. In the world of PMI, a risk is just uncertainty. That's it. It can be a good thing, we call those opportunities, or it can be a bad thing. Today, we are focused squarely on the negative side of that coin, threats. A project threat is any uncertain event that, if it actually happens, is going to hurt your project's objectives, your scope, your schedule, your budget. Now, where does this fit in the grand scheme of things? Threat response planning is a core part of your overall risk management process. It happens after you've identified and analyzed your risks. But it isn't a one-and-done deal. It's iterative. You're doing this throughout the entire project. And remember, the key word is uncertain. Once it happens, it's no longer a threat, it's an issue. Our job is to deal with threats before they become issues.
So how do we actually do that? How do we strategically neutralize these threats before they blow up our project? Well, we use 5 core strategies. I want you to think of these as your 5 strategic defenses. This isn't just some academic list you memorize. This is the complete professional's toolkit straight from the Project Management Institute. Mastering these 5 responses, and maybe more importantly, knowing exactly when to use each one is absolutely non-negotiable for leading high-stakes projects and, for crushing those tricky situational questions on your PMP exam.
First up, we've got the most powerful and often the most disruptive strategy, avoidance. This is your most aggressive move. You aren't just trying to lessen the threat. You are fundamentally changing your project plan to eliminate it completely. You're trying to drive its probability down to absolute zero. The classic example? You're scheduling a huge construction project in Southeast Asia. You identify the monsoon season as a massive threat to your schedule. You don't just buy better rain gear for your crew, no. You avoid the threat by changing the entire project schedule to the dry season. Or think about a tech project. If using some brand new, unproven software is a threat to your timeline, you might avoid it by choosing a more stable, proven alternative. The key trade-off here, though, is that avoidance almost always impacts something else. Changing the schedule might jack up the costs, and using older tech might mean fewer features. It's a powerful choice for sure, but it often comes with a hefty price tag.
Next up, we have transfer. Now, this strategy doesn't make the threat disappear. What it does is make it someone else's problem. You are shifting the ownership of that threat and its negative consequences to a third party, and you're almost always paying them for the privilege. The easiest example to understand is just buying insurance. A fire in your warehouse is a threat. You transfer the financial impact to an insurance company. Simple. Other forms could be performance bonds, warranties, or even subcontracting out a really high-risk piece of work. If your team isn't great at a particular software module, you could transfer that development risk to a specialist firm using a fixed-price contract. But here's the senior-level insight. Transference creates a new secondary risk. It's called counterparty risk. You've outsourced the headache, sure, but what if your insurance company goes under, or that specialist vendor fails to deliver? You're never completely free of the consequences.
Okay, now for the strategy you're probably going to use most often, mitigation. When you can't avoid a threat and it's just not practical to transfer it, you mitigate it. Mitigation means taking proactive steps to either reduce the probability of the threat happening in the first place or to lessen its impact if it does. And that distinction is crucial. Let's go back to that construction project. A worker getting injured is a known threat. So how do you mitigate its probability? Well, you could mandate advanced safety training and conduct daily equipment checks. And how do you mitigate its impact? You could have paramedics on site, a clear emergency evacuation plan, and great medical facilities nearby. See the difference? You haven't eliminated the threat, but you've actively made it less likely and less harmful. In a software project, a great mitigation strategy might be building a small prototype early on, just to prove a complex integration can work. You're spending a little time and money upfront to reduce the probability of a massive failure down the road.
Strategy number 4 is one of the most misunderstood, so listen close. It's acceptance. And let's be absolutely clear about this. In professional project management, acceptance is a strategic choice. It is not negligence. You consciously decide to accept a threat when it's low priority, low probability and low impact, or when the cost of doing anything else would actually be more than the potential damage. Think about it. On any big project, you're going to have hundreds of identified threats. If you try to fight every single battle, you'll go bankrupt and your project will grind to a halt. Acceptance is about strategically saving your resources, your time, your money, your team's focus for the threats that really, truly matter. You acknowledge it exists, you log it in the risk register, and you decide to, maybe do nothing for now. But as we're about to see, doing nothing comes in two very, very different flavors.
And finally, our 5th strategy is escalation. This is what you do when a threat is simply bigger than your project, or it's outside of your authority as the project manager. Your job is to protect the project, sure, but some threats can endanger the entire program, the portfolio, or even the whole organization. For example, if you find a threat that could violate a major government regulation or one that could do serious damage to your company's public reputation, that is not your burden to carry alone. You escalate it to the right level, your sponsor, the PMO, or senior leadership. The key here is that you're transferring the ownership of the threat to the person or group that actually has the authority and resources to handle it. You don't just wash your hands of it, you formally communicate it and make sure that new owner accepts it. It's a critical act of professional responsibility. Now, here's where things get really interesting. That one strategy, acceptance, has a crucial distinction inside of it that the PMP exam absolutely loves to test. It really gets to the heart of a project leader's judgment. It forces us to ask a tough question. When is choosing not to act actually the most strategic action you can take? Let's peel back the layers on this one, because understanding this nuance is what separates a good project manager from a truly great one. And this brings us to the 2 flavors, passive versus active acceptance. Passive acceptance is pretty much what it sounds like. You document the risk, you put it on your risk register, and that's about it. You'll keep an eye on it, but there's no special plan, no money set aside. If the threat actually happens, the team will have to scramble to figure out a workaround on the fly. Now think about a PMP question. If they describe a super low impact, low probability threat, simply documenting and monitoring it, passive acceptance, could be the right answer. But active acceptance, that is a whole different level of discipline. Here, you not only acknowledge the risk, you invest time creating a specific contingency plan, a what-if plan that's ready to go. And, crucially, you establish a contingency reserve, a dedicated pot of time or money to pay for that plan. So if the threat is triggered, you don't panic, you don't go begging for funds, you execute your pre-approved plan with your pre-approved resources. Active acceptance is being prepared, passive acceptance is just being aware. So now we've got our 5 strategies and we even understand the deep nuance within acceptance. But the real skill of a senior project manager isn't just knowing the list. The real art is knowing which strategy to apply in which situation. And this isn't about gut feelings or what you did on your last project. It's about using a disciplined, data-driven framework to make the absolute best choice for your project, right here, right now. Your decision has to be based on a careful analysis of these key factors. First, significance. How big is the threat, really? A high probability, high impact threat screams for a strong response like avoidance. Next, cost-benefit analysis. Is the cure worse than the disease? Spending $50,000 to mitigate a potential $10,000 loss is just bad management. Then, think about the impact on constraints. How does your choice ripple across the rest of the project? Avoiding a risk by changing the scope might really tick off a key stakeholder. And crucially, what's your organization's risk appetite? A startup in move fast and break things mode is going to have a very different tolerance for risk than a pharmaceutical company developing a new drug. Your decision has to be a rational blend of hard data and alignment with your environment. This table really pulls it all together. Think of it as your quick reference guide. You use avoid for the biggest, scariest monsters that you can realistically plan around. You use transfer for the risks you can pay someone else to worry about. You mitigate the serious threats you have to face head-on. You accept the small stuff that just isn't worth a big investment, and you escalate the problems that are literally above your pay grade. But notice the last column. Every single choice has a key trade-off. There is no perfect cost-free answer in project management. Your job as the leader is to analyze these trade-offs and pick the response that delivers the most value to the project, period. Which brings us right back to where we started. We've explored the toolkit, we've walked through the decision-making, we've dived into the details. Now it's time to answer that question. Let's put it back up on the screen because it's just that important. What is the true cost of a guess you were 100% sure was right? The answer comes in two parts. The first part is this: the integrator's gap. When you, the project manager, rely on a single guess, a gut feeling, you create a massive blind spot. The integrator's gap is the chasm between your one assumed future and the thousands of other potential futures you never even planned for. It's the invisible liability you create by choosing certainty over strategy. It is the cost of everything you didn't see coming, because you are so focused on the one thing you're sure would happen. And this gap leads directly to the ultimate price you pay, the watermelon project. This is a project where all the status reports are bright, beautiful green on the outside. Everything looks perfect. But underneath that thin green skin, there is a deep red core of unmanaged, unmitigated, and unaccepted uncertainty that is just growing, festering, ready to explode when it's way too late to do anything about it. The project looks healthy, but it's rotten on the inside. That is the true cost of guessing. It's not just that you were wrong, it's that you created a project that was designed to fail, while telling everyone it was on the path to success. So how do we stop ourselves from ever serving up a watermelon project to our stakeholders? How do we close that integrator's gap and become the strategic leaders our organizations desperately need? It all comes down to a few critical takeaways. Let's lock them in right now, not just for your exam, but for your entire career. Number 1, threats are always negative. This simple focus keeps your risk management sharp and targeted. 2, burn the 5 strategies into your brain. Avoid, transfer, mitigate, accept, and escalate. That's your entire toolkit. 3, your choice of strategy must always be driven by rational analysis, not by habit or a gut feeling. 4, know the critical difference between active and passive acceptance. One is proactive preparation, the other is simple awareness. Knowing which one a situation calls for is key. And finally, number 5, remember your fundamental job as a project integrator. It is to close that gap between guessing and strategic planning, and it's to build processes that prevent those deceptive watermelon projects at all costs. Your ultimate value isn't just getting things done. It's delivering success by design, not by chance.